Particles cannot be waves. First principle, in a world of particles being extensive waves, its common noise, produced by mutual interference, would prevent the execution, manifestation, and measure of the properties of any of them. Friends, I am aware that in a world of blind adoration of quantum mechanics and its teachings, it is a horrible sin to not agree with it, much less criticize it. But hey, since I am a true sinner, I am obliged and I dare to do it. I'm sorry. In this case, I am referring to the consideration and belief that particles are above all waves, when in reality waves consist of oscillations of material fluids that cannot move, such as water, air, gravity, magnetic fields, etc. Of course, particles and bodies that move can produce waves in the fluid medium in which they move, because they give it force that forces them to oscillate. What never happens is a wave in the vacuum, that is, the vacuum oscillates. So, and referring to our case of light as an electromagnetic wave, we ask ourselves, well, what does that electromagnetic wave consist of? Well, as they explain it to us, it would have to be a particle, for example the photon, or the electron, that can create around itself a field of undulating forces of between 10 to the power of 14 and 10 to the power of 20 its diameter as minimum. That is, and taking it to our level, it is as if a golf ball produced a field of forces around it greater than our solar system, in such a way that this ball could move another electron that was outside the solar system. Of course, this field of oscillating forces would have a gigantic expenditure of energy, since as we know every oscillation has a continuous expenditure of energy. But of course a good lover, or believer, of quantum could argue that anything is possible, since in quantum mechanics we have seen stranger things. But of course, if we consider particles like electrons to also be waves, then we would have another problem. 2. That in any place, such as the single and double slit device, there are billions of electrons in the slits, in the air, on the plate, on the screen, etc., and all with the same type of wave, whereupon they would all collapse into a sea of similar waves, where none would produce any appreciable effect. Therefore, electrons like photons and any other particle are not interrelated waves, linked and interdependent with each other, but only point particles and autonomous materials that can have their own movements, changes, crossings, etc., without depending on each other. In short, a compact world of intermingled waves would simply collapse, and each of these waves would not be able to function or execute their potential separately. Everything would be an undulating chaos without the capacity for manifestation, evolution, transformation, etc. Let us think, for example, of the surface of a lake, where it rains heavily and each drop produces its own wave. The result is that no wave can be measured or manifested separately, everything is an undulating chaos. And worse would be a three-dimensional world where all its particles were waves with an incredible range, as photons or electrons are said to have, mixing, cancelling, interfering, etc., with each other. And this is what is explained and shown in the needle experiment that I explained to you previously and that you can see in the accompanying videos, that is, particles are only material elements, punctual, autonomous and free to relate to each other without a gigantic shell or undulating field that conditions, interferes, collapses, duplicates, superimposes, etc. So in summarizing my views, we would have that the particles cannot be waves for the following. 1. They are not wave interference, but simple particle reflections on the inner walls and edges of the slits where the experiments of simple and double or more slits are done, as can be seen in the needle experiment. 2. They cannot be waves because the immense extension and scope given to these waves would be so gigantic that they would measure more than 10 elevated to 20 times the diameter of the particles, and such waves would need a gigantic energy expense and constant, and that goes against all existing physical laws. Energy is not created or destroyed. 3. It is not possible that they are waves because the interrelation of all these waves between them in the same cosmic space, as assured occurs in the experiment with slits, would produce infinite interference between them and could not express themselves, or measure, or auto-interfere with each other alone, since as these wave-particle proposals arise, these waves can handle their particles through interference between these waves. For, if the particles were the waves that are proposed with the experiments of the slits, each and every one of this wave particle, when being influenced by its neighbors, will have a constant and chaotic oscillation, and quasi-static and without rectilinear or uniform movement capacity, without good definition, unable to be measured as a lone element, etc. Then, particles cannot be waves that have around them that giant and oscillate layers that would manage them and prevent them from being autonomous and moving freely. Well, for now nothing more. Thank you very much to all.